Okay, so welcome. We're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about the stakeholder management today, June 11th, and we will also do some questions. So first, what are we going to cover today? We will cover the PMBOK 8th edition that was just released this 2026, and stakeholder management domain, what used to be called um, knowledge area, now are called domains. And the big change about the stakeholder management for PMBOK 8 is that they merge um, communication management with the stakeholder management. Stakeholder management was introduced on PMBOK 5th edition back in 2014-13 about. That was about 13 years ago, 12 years ago. And it became a very important part of project management. We would say back in the day, 90% of the time, project managers are communicating written, verbal, formal, informal, and they're managing stakeholders, all kind of stakeholders, suppliers, government, clients, users, different functional managers, even the resources team members. So they merged. Very common questions that we find in the exam are related to, am I dealing with the stakeholder management plan or the communications management plan? So the question is still there, just that everything is going to be under a stakeholder domain. So that's what we're going to cover today at a very high level, uh, as usual. So this is our web page with William and myself. We do one-on-one coaching for people that are getting ready for PMP exam. Here are our services. If anybody wants, we can send them the information. So let's get going. First of all, how do project managers deal with different stakeholders throughout the project from beginning to the end? So the first thing we need to know is that the sponsor, that could be the portfolio manager or the program manager or even a committee in the organization, delivers the business documents. Usually we would talk about the benefit management plan or the business case. Nothing has changed much there. Uh, that's the first input we have, business documents, especially the business case that justifies the project regarding monetary value. And then with that, we get the project charter, right, in initiating processes. And then we start the project, okay? We execute the project, and here we deal with different stakeholders through procurement, also maybe with communities, government, different stakeholders. And then the deliverables and also the project records affect other stakeholders such as the end users, but also the OPAs, the organizational process assets. So of course, these OPAs are going to be used in new projects in the future. So they are very important. All these lessons learned and project records are very useful for future use for different stakeholders. So this is the different relationships that different project managers um, deal with. Okay, so that is that. Mm, let me just see this here. Sorry. Good. So now, what is a stakeholder? Well, there are different kind of stakeholders. Uh, the usual ones we would deal with are the resources we have, like the project team or the project management team, which are not the same. One executes, another one could be part of different committees or control boards, especially in waterfall. But also we have the steering committees, which have a lot of power, very similar to the sponsor, governing bodies like the PMO, for example, and project management offices. Okay, so we could also have here other um, stakeholders that are not so close to the project manager. Let's see, suppliers or vendors, which with those you negotiate and procure, customers that have a lot of requirements, end users, they are not usually the same. One thing is the customer, another one is the user. Regulatory bodies from the government, local communities, and also family itself, and many, many more, many other institutions. So dealing with this has a little bit of an art. Okay, so those are the different stakeholders that we have. Okay, so nothing has changed much from PMBOK 8 compared to PMBOK 6 edition or the Group of Processes Practice Guide in terms of identifying stakeholders. So let's just take a quick look here. We still have a key input, which is the project charter, the different business documents that we just talked about, like the business case, which is usually um, delivered by the sponsor, the benefits management plan. Also, very as we just saw, there is a close relationship between communications and stakeholder management, which now is one domain. Before it was two knowledge areas, now it's only one domain. Then we have the change log. If we have any change, it has to be communicated to the different stakeholders. Same thing with issues and requirements. Remember, when we close a project or phase, we go back to initiation to initiate the new project or the new phase of the same project. Agreements is very important because one of the key inputs of this process of identifying stakeholders is the different contracts we could have or the different verbal or written agreements that we have. And then we have, of course, the OPAs from old projects that would give us an idea of who would we have to deal with in terms of a stakeholder management. And then, of course, the organizational process assets, yeah, in terms of lessons learned and enterprise environmental factors such as industry standards. Then we have different tools and techniques like expert judgment. You might want to also do questionnaires or surveys, which are very costly in time, but very good to get detailed information about who can help you. Brainstorming with your team members, and of course, data analysis like a stakeholder analysis and document analysis. We do that. But one that is very common, and I always like to talk about it a lot because many people skip it because it seems very simple, is the data representation, especially the stakeholder mapping representation. We will talk about that in a bit, but basically always remember salience model, that is urgency, legitimacy, and power. Urgency, legitimacy, and power. We will talk about that. Power and interest grid and the stakeholder cube. Always remember that you do in initiation when you identify a stakeholder. The key output of identifying the stakeholders is the stakeholder register, which looks like a little bit like this one. The name of the stakeholder, the position or role, organization, uh, if it's internal or external, the contact information, if it's supportive, neutral, or resistant, what is the major requirement and main expectations, something like that, very simple. More than the template itself, always remember anything that has to do with logs, anything that has to do with registers, those are vivid documents. They do not need change control, usually, okay? Then you have the change requests as an output. Why? Because you might identify different stakeholders that are difficult or in favor of your project. You want to use that in favor of the project success. So you have that. And then you can update the different documents like the requirement management plan that has to do with the scope, communication management plan, which now we know is nowadays part of the same domain, a stakeholder domain, risk management, because you might find different requirements that are important, right? Um, and you need to plan ahead, right? That are important, and maybe there is a probability of an opportunity or probability of a threat. And then you have the assumption log, very important for initiation especially, and of course, identifying stakeholders is at initiation. Issue log, because remember, even though this is in initiation, we could have issues from other phases and even from the same project, but mostly from the same project from another phase review, okay? And then you have the risk register. All of those documents are vivid documents that you can update without any changes. So pay attention to this. There's going to be a question about this. These are two tools or techniques that are very common on stakeholder management. Nothing has changed again in this term. One of them is the power and interest grid, which is in the right. So whoever has high power and high interest, you want to manage closely here. That is face-to-face meeting, hopefully, or video conferences, hopefully something like a lunch or something very close. Uh, those that have only high power but low interest, you keep them satisfied. You try to execute what they want if it's possible and keep them satisfied. Um, those that have low power and low interest, you monitor closely, and those that only have interest, keep them informed, like send them an email, a report, things like that, just information. And the power and interest, sorry, the salience model in the right, as I was saying, power, legitimacy, and urgency. Legitimacy is that the involvement of the stakeholder is appropriate. What does appropriate mean? Maybe the government is going to build a highway on my near my backyard. Maybe I don't have power or urgency, right? But I have a legitimate concern about this project. So that's the salience model. Okay, this is the same key element here, stakeholder register to identify stakeholders. So let's do the first question of the day. You're going to vote in the chat or you can open up your mics, whichever you prefer. Welcome, Rabah. So this is the first question. A project manager is analyzing the stakeholders' status and plotting them on a power interest grid. The sponsor and customer are plotted in high power and high interest quadrant. What approach should the project manager adopt for these stakeholders? You can vote. Okay, so we have a vote for B and one a vote for A. Okay. Okay, so this person has high power and high interest. Okay, so I will try to draw it here. Is this kind of the power? Oops, sorry. You can see what I am writing, right? I think you can. Power and interest. So if you have high power and high interest, you want to manage that person closely. What does manage closely mean? Again, hopefully two-way conversation, face to face. If not, virtual meetings. If not, cell phone. That has bi-directional conversation and constant. Someone that only has power but no interest, just keep them satisfied. What does that mean? Whenever they show up, try to show you are concerned about what they are thinking about, right? What they want, but you don't want to manage them closely. You don't want to get them too involved. They only have power, they are dormant. And those that have low power and low interest, just monitor them. And those that have high interest but low power, you want to just keep them informed, okay? Keep informed. That is, send different information like reports, bi-directional information, sorry, one-way information, pull communication. Same thing I was drawing is here. Whatever is important is this little strategies, okay? Manage closely was the right answer. Okay. It's a very common question in the exam. That's why I bring it. It's very common from about 10 years ago. Okay, so now after we identify the stakeholders and do the mapping, who has what power and what interest, we move forward to the plan stakeholder engagement, okay? Which is basically in planning. Nothing has changed much from the PMBOK 6 to the PMBOK 8 or from the group of processes practice guide. Same important inputs, charter, project management plan, the different documents that now you know, assumption log, change log, issue log, all the registers you can update. Same thing with the stakeholder register, you can update without any change control. They're vivid documents. And then you have the tools and techniques, expert judgment to plan how you're going to engage these people. Data gathering like benchmarking, what are the industry standards. Then you have data analysis like assumption and constraints analysis or root cause analysis. You can also prioritize or rank for decision making. You could do mind mapping. And for data representation, one that I like the most, and is also a very old common tool and technique, is the stakeholder engagement assessment matrix, which is in the right. So in this a stakeholder engagement assessment matrix, which is a very common tool in planning a stakeholder engagement, basically what you're doing is you're listing all the stakeholders from 1 to n, and you say, okay, this person is currently unaware. I want the desired stage to be supportive. Currently neutral, I want this person to be supportive. Or currently is supportive, I want this person to stay there. Or maybe even someone is leading, but you just want the person to be neutral. You don't want that person to be a champion for some reason. So that's what you want there. After you map them and you say, okay, this person has power, this person has interest, this person maybe has a legitimate concern, then you plan how to engage them. So besides this, you might write a little plan on how to engage them, and that's the stakeholder engagement plan, okay? And you have that as a key output. Nothing has changed again much. Okay, let's do the number 2 question. At the start of phase 2, the project manager is reviewing the stakeholder information to identify additions, changes, and capturing of new stakeholder requirements. Which project document will be updated after this review? Okay, so we have a vote for A. And a vote for D, a stakeholder engagement plan. Okay, so this is a typical question. Let me just show you here. That when this is the domain of stakeholders, right? In initiation, you identify them. In planning, you plan a stakeholder engagement and communications. Then in execution, you manage them, the stakeholders, and you manage communications according to the plan. Monitoring and controlling, you monitor the engagement and the communications. And in closure, you do nothing, right? Closure, you only do an integration, close project or phase, and you initiate again. So this question basically is right here. You have done the phase gate review. So after the phase gate review, you're going to identify the stakeholders again. So the first thing you gotta do is update the stakeholder register. You want to update who is in, who is out, what their interest is. So in this case, for question number 2, the answer was a stakeholder register, which is a vivid document. Okay, you're reviewing the stakeholder information to identify additions, change, and capturing of new stakeholder requirements. So that could sound like quality, but the first thing you want to update, right, is the stakeholder register. You want to keep that up to date. Who is who? How much power is it neutral against the project or in favor? That's what you should do first. Tricky questions, I know.
It's the one.
Yeah.
Um, that was my first choice, but when it said requirements, that's when I changed it because this is capturing new stakeholder requirements, right?
Yeah.
Um, I think requirements is basically how you want to communicate with them. Like it was between, so first choice was B, stakeholder register. But then when it says capturing new stakeholder requirements, it was like, is it D or is it A now?
Mhm.
That's my
That's
line
that.
of thinking, my line of thinking, right?
Yeah.
Because you're saying new requirements. So I'm thinking you're capturing your new people, you're capturing any changes, then you're saying your requirements, right? Um, so requirements as in how you talk to them, how you communicate with them, or how do you engage with them, right? So, anyways, the only one I didn't choose was C,
Mhm.
right?
Okay. Yeah,
Um,
that's good. Yeah, thanks for sharing. I would say new stakeholder requirements would trigger change in the scope management plan, or it would trigger changes in the that affect the requirement uh, plan, the requirement yeah, requirements management plan, which would lead to change the RTM, requirement traceability matrix. So that's true. This would lead you to many things, right? This would lead
mhm,
to many things. But the first thing you need to update is who is who. Do I
mhm.
have the same stakeholders? Are there new ones? Are the old ones still active in the same way, same power and interest? So you got to update the stakeholder register always when you go back to initiation. That's the first thing you do. Then you do everything else. Okay?
But
Okay, good. So let's see. Now this is new. Back in the day, again, knowledge area, you would have communication management and stakeholder management. Nowadays, we only have 7 domains instead of 10 um, knowledge areas. 7 domains instead of 10 knowledge areas. So stakeholder and communications merged, as I said. So we have here now the plan communications management. Again, I won't read the inputs, very similar to the old ones. I will focus on the tools and techniques, as you may know now. We have about 90 of these. Actually, there are about 86 in the book, but in real life, this could be up to 100 or more, 200. So we have expert judgment, how to communicate, communication requirements analysis, communications technology. Is it going to be Zoom or Slack or what are we going to use? Communication models, communication methods, written, formal, informal, interpersonal and team skills like communication styles assessment, political awareness, who is who, cultural awareness, very important. And data representation, again, a stakeholder engagement assessment matrix, we just saw it. So this is a tool also to plan the communication engagement. Meetings, how we are going to do the meeting, the agenda, all those beautiful things. Then the output, we have the communications management plan for sure. We could update the stakeholder engagement plan based on the needs of each stakeholder, and we could also update the schedule and the stakeholder register, which is a vivid document. Um, what I would say here is that communication management usually deals with how often we communicate, how often, what channels we will use. So whenever you see a question about frequency and channels, we would be talking about communications management plan. Okay, good. Let's look at this beautiful question. Is this the same one? Yeah, this one is the same one. Sorry, my bad. Let's see. Oh my. So let's do, I think this is the last question. So again, for those that are just arriving, I think Maria is there and Rabah, Millicent. I know Maria, I know all of you, I think. Um, Again, we have here our information for PMP coaching or 35-hour course as well. We have a 35-hour course by an ATP partner that is an authorized training partner by the PMI. And we could also have the full bundle with all the necessary tools to pass the exam, like the PMI membership, exam voucher, and so on, just in case. So welcome, Maria. So let's do the last question. Which of the following statements is not correct about the stakeholders? This is question number 4, if I'm not wrong. Okay, so we have a vote for B. I have another vote for B. Maria, Millicent. We're just missing Raba. Okay, I cannot see the question. Oh, sorry, Raba. Which of the following statements is not correct about the stakeholders? And yes, the answer is B. The project manager should give priority to internal stakeholders. That would mean you are going to focus on your team members, this kind of stakeholders that we saw at the beginning. That would be the team members, um, project management team, different committees we have there, the project manager. But we might start to forget the sponsor, governing bodies, PMO, steering committee, or even we could pay attention to that, but not to suppliers, customers, local communities. And that's not the case always. You have to pay attention to all of the stakeholders. So that's the wrong one. Okay. Project manager should give priority to internal stakeholders. That's not true. So always read well if the question says, except which one is not true, things like that. Let's look at this last question. I think this is number 4, if I'm not wrong. The main output of identify stakeholders process is the stakeholder register. We know that now. Which of the following information is not captured in the stakeholder register? Okay, Millicent goes for A. Maria goes for B. Can you read the question, Rabah? No. Okay. So we will move forward. The answer is A. Okay, and I will explain why. Because remember, in initiation, we identify the stakeholders. To identify them, we need the ID of the stakeholder. We could understand it as a number, but also the name, contact information. Assessment information is also important. You want to see how much power, interest, or also urgency these stakeholders could have. So that's C. And classification. You can classify them as well based on the power and interest, high power, high interest, low power, low interest, those kind of things. So you're going to do that in the stakeholder mapping process, and I will show you. So the answer is A, stakeholder engagement strategies. You don't do that in initiation. You do this in planning, okay? That is why this is not the answer. The rest you do in initiation. You get identification information, assessment information, and classification. You can classify them in many ways. So the answer was A. Okay, guys, do you have any questions or comments? not for now. So thank you for your time. I'm gonna stop this.